Hi, my name's Emily Rose Adams. Welcome to Presently Presents.
Somebody had said to me even back at 2018, Steve, in a couple of years you'll be warming up for Chris Evans, Graham Norton will be handing over to you, you'll have Jeremy Kyle wanting you to guest on his TV show. I'll be like, what? I think actually being nice and people liking you is so important. It's not necessarily being great at the job. You've got to be great. You just got to kind of fit in. No one wants to work with a nightmare.
Hello, welcome back to Presently Presents, and I'm really excited to be bringing this week's guest to you. On this episode, we're going to be speaking to a radio legend who started his career presenting on Surf 107 in Brighton alongside Fatboy Slim before joining Galaxy Radio before it became Capital FM. He then spent 14 years on the airways presenting for Heart and now works for Virgin Radio alongside the likes of Chris Evans and Graham Norton. He also is a regular contributor for TalkTV with loads of exciting career developments on the way. Today's Presently Presents guest is Steve Denyer.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great.
We
How are you?
We often meet in the corridor, and it's nice to actually sit down with you and properly have a chat.
It's so nice. Yeah, we've worked in the same building for a few years now, so we have the pleasure of seeing each other, but as you said, it's usually just in passing.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. I've it's kind of like 10 o'clock now, so I've done my show already, and this is quite new for me. So I've started a new show the early part of this summer, Early Breakfast, before Chris Evans. So I went from doing the evening show, which was, I got into work at 5:30 in the evening, and now I'm getting to work at kind of 4 in the morning. So
Wow.
It's been it just all changed within a week, but I think I've finally got my my routine together.
Amazing. That must be a real shock to the system, I guess, because I've got a lot of experience with breakfast, which for me that's kind of hard. Like that's getting in at probably about 5:30, but I've never had to get in at 4. So that is amazing. Yeah. How are you finding it?
Do you know, I was nervous and I didn't know. They gave me the choice. They said, look, try it out, because the presenter left, and they thought I would sound good before Chris Evans wanted me on the show, but they said, we realise it might not be for you. Give it a go. And I realised, I never had to get up really early in the morning, but I realised I can do it. And also, I think I sound better. I'm certainly a lot fresher being on the air, like first thing, as opposed to waiting all day to be on the radio. Because by the time you get to 7, your average person's quite tired. We've had our day, and it's kind of like a wind down thing. So this is a completely different thing where I'm on air and I'm building things up for Chris. And from about kind of 5:45 in the morning, it's building momentum for Chris Evans, for the kind of 40 minutes. And we looked at the figures, and every 10 minutes, thousands more people tune in and stuff. So it's basically, I get to start people's days. And at that time of the morning, people actually remember more of what you say and stuff, because it's a very exclusive little club first thing in the morning. It's very intimate.
Yeah, and there's a buzz. I've often found that the sort of breakfast kind of time of the morning, it feels like there's this strange energy. I don't know if it's the lack of sleep or the adrenaline, but it does feel more exciting than the evenings. I feel like the evenings, everyone's a bit more chilled out. The mornings, as you said, there's more energy. So yeah, that's really exciting that you've got that role, like warming up Chris Evans as well. That must be really exciting.
Absolutely. It's great for me because, 20-year-old Steve, if he'd seen what 40-odd-year-old Steve's doing, you'd be very impressed. This is kind of, for me, living the dream, because I used to listen to Chris, and when he was on Radio 1, I used to think, oh my God, imagine being part of that team, and just to see him working. And he often invites me on the show now, so quite regularly, a couple of times a week, he'd be like, "Get Steve in, let's talk about this." So to be part of his team, and for him to rate me as a broadcaster it's a dream come true.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the celebs that he gets on his show, when I've worked up there around that area, it's just like every day there's someone really exciting coming in. They just casually walk past you and you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah. It's so bizarre. It's because you can have some of the world's biggest stars in the corridor, and then you've got Talk Sport up the corridor, And, you know, I'm not very sporty, but I recognise England managers down there and England players and stuff. And then you've got Julia Hartley-Brewer interviewing the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Chris Evans with a real housewife of Beverly Hills. It's a real floor 17 of the news building. It could be a soap opera.
It is. It's very exciting. I feel like we've been lucky to be part of it.
Yeah.
I always like starting the podcast with asking this question: what does a day in the life of Steve Denyer look like? So your average work day, for instance. I guess now with your early breakfast, it might look a bit different to before, but how do you start your day?
I start my day by literally, I've got my morning routine of like 14 minutes, getting up out of bed, having a quick Nespresso, a nice advert, then getting in the shower, I can do it all within 25 minutes. I'm in work, and then I usually have a couple of things that I'd like to talk about when I'm on air, but most of it is literally just, seeing the papers, figuring out what people are saying on social media and stuff, and just I like to kind of catch up on the day in the first 10 minutes of the show, really. And then I do the show. So the show's 4 a.m. to 6:30. And then I stick around because I'm on other Virgin radio stations where we voice track the other stations, which involves kind of pre-recording links and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I make sure I do some exercise. So I go to Greenwich Park, I walk through the park, I make sure I go to the gym. And then quite often, as you know, recently, I've been going back into TalkTV and doing little guest spots. Some are in the mid-morning show. Sometimes they're on Drive Time with Jeremy Kyle. So it's been busy, actually, just keeping things going and working at different times.
Yeah, that is incredibly busy. I feel like you couldn't pack more into your day if you tried.
Working at news, I was just going to say, working at news, there's lots of opportunities to do different bits of broadcasting. So the more opportunities I get, I just want to say yes to everything and try and do everything as well as I can.
Yeah. So just to clarify for those who don't know, at the news building, as we were just referring to, you've got Virgin Radio, Talk Sport, Talk Radio, Talk TV. So it's a kind of media hub. So you've got the pleasure of being able to kind of do both radio and TV as your job, which is quite unusual for a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people who do radio for as long as you have don't often kind of venture into TV. So that's something that you've been doing recently. So I see you pop up frequently on the screens, especially when there's a breaking news, like entertainment story or something. They're like, Steve's our guy. You're there very quickly because you live in central London. So that's also very helpful. And then you're kind of reporting on different stories and contributing. So how are you finding all of that? Because that's quite different to hosting your own radio show.
Yeah, it is. And when I was terrified the first time I was on with Jeremy Kyle, I think it was like last October. And I rewatched it and I was horrified. I was like, Steve, you need to stop doing this and stop doing that. But actually, I've really grown to love television. The feedback's been really good. People have said, you look really natural. I've never done it up until last year. I've never, ever been on TV. The opportunity's never, arisen. So I love it. I mean, luckily enough, working with Jeremy Kyle is amazing. So we hit it off immediately. There were a couple of things I could have done better, and I've just learned. I don't know what you've been like, because I know obviously we met each other in a radio environment first, but you look so confident and together on television. Back in October, I didn't. I was kind of not looking in the right place, didn't know where to look. If somebody interrupted me, I'm thinking, but I need to get back to what's on my script, if you know what I mean. So I'm just kind of relaxed now. I almost treat the cameras as if they're not there when I'm doing the bit with Jeremy. So it's almost like we're having a chat and trying to make it as natural as possible. But no, it's completely bizarre. I've never even thought about television. It's never, ever been on my radar whatsoever. And yet, I seem to be okay at it, and people seem to like me on it. So it's nice. So doing radio and TV. Oh, thank you. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, you're just you're such a laid back and warm character that I feel like you belong on TV. This is your calling.
Well, I'm hoping to do more. I think it'd be really great if I could get, for argument's sake, early breakfast. Keep on doing that.
Yeah.
And then doing some afternoon work or some early evening work on the telly. That's a really nice kind of, calendar of work Monday to Friday, isn't it? So, and it keeps me busy. It keeps me out the pub.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess that would mean sort of sleeping in stages throughout the day. I don't know, maybe you'd get 4 hours sleep at night and then 4 in the afternoon, but who needs sleep?
Well, I mean, I've noticed that I didn't know until I started early breakfast. I can sleep whenever. I've tried doing the kind of four fours. You're going to judge me now, but I sometimes go to bed at 6:30 in the evening because I really love
I'm
getting like a huge 9 hours sleep. Which is very
yeah.
boring. I used to be fun, didn't I? You remember me a couple of years
I
ago.
have the same issue. I really do. I'm in bed if I'm on the early shifts, I'm in bed by 8 o'clock, which is not glamorous in the
Yeah,
slightest. People who tell you that the world of TV and broadcasting is glamorous lie. Um, so sleep is important. Hopefully you'll manage to find some with your kind of radio and TV appearances. It all sounds really, really exciting, but I'd quite like to know, how did you kind of begin? Is presenting something you always really wanted to do, or did you fall into it? Because you mentioned to me before that you started out working in newspapers right at the very, very beginning. So how did you kind of make that transition?
So I started off, I was literally at school. I was 14. As if you remember, we had to do a 2 weeks work experience placement. So you had to find someone to do work experience. And bless my mum, she phoned the editor of my local paper and said, "My son's great. He can make great tea. Please give him a chance." So they gave me a chance and I went in and I got on with everybody. And then they kept inviting me back. So that was the start of the journalism thing. But in the background, I was doing hospital radio. And I started that when I think I was 16. That was the age when you could start it. So I literally did a Friday night show. I loved it. I loved doing the journalism because I love people, but the radio thing I really loved. I used to tape radio shows. So I think my mum and dad got me a stereo stack system when I was about 12. And I remember tuning into Capital in London, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and I heard this guy called Pete Tong. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy sounds really cool. And he was playing songs that weren't released for like 8 years. And I was like, wow, this guy is amazing. I kind of built up a picture in my mind of who I thought he was. And I thought, gosh, imagine having that job where you're paid to play really good music. And he clearly loved his job and he was going clubbing, his own club nights and stuff. I thought this is quite incredible. So I think thanks to Pete and a few other DJs in the 80s on Capital, that really kick-started my passion. I was like, this is the most amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, that crowd in particular, they were absolute radio legends, still are. And you
Yeah,
mentioned hospital radio. I'm a big advocate for doing these kind of volunteers. So I did a community radio station. That's how I started in radio. Um,
yeah.
did you think that was a good chance for you to kind of get comfortable? Because it's quite hard in radio to start. Unless you have that kind of opportunity, it's very unlikely someone's going to just throw you. If it's kind of a paid radio job and there's, at least a few thousand listeners, it's quite unlikely that the program manager is going to just go like, there you go, good luck and have fun. So did you
Yeah,
think that hospital radio was a good chance to kind of learn?
I felt it's really good. It's really great to get experience. However, what I would say about hospital radio is there's a lot of politics and a lot of infighting, and if you can try and ignore that and just take it as a really good chance to go on air and to make some mistakes. I was terrible. I was really bad, you know. Um, but it was just great to kind of work out how a desk works and to be comfortable with how you sound on the radio as well. Because people always used to say in my classes at school that I was the first kid in my class, my voice broke. And everyone was like, oh my God, Steve, you've got the most amazing voice. Do the chart numbers in French and stuff. And I used to do that messing around. But actually, when I first went on air, I was like, oh my God, this is really freaking me out because I can hear myself back and my voice sounded completely different to me. So it's just kind of grappling with the basics of radio, and hospital radio gives you that chance. And I suppose now, like you say, community radio stations are really invaluable way of learning the ropes. And also, everyone can get equipment now. So maybe if you could start to do podcasts or little things you can post to social media, that's probably really great experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. I guess there's more resources out there now than there were before. I
Yeah.
mean, I would absolutely cringe if I heard the first community radio show that I ever did. I'm sure it was a disaster. I think I've blocked it from my memory. It was probably that traumatic, but it's definitely a really good place to kind of like practice and get feedback. I was really quite proactive with kind of getting feedback. So I used to download some of my shows and send them to friends and people in the industry. And
Hmm.
I think that's a really good place to kind of just learn how you sound and come up with your own style. So how did you make that transition? Because you ended up working for a bit at Surf 107 in Brighton alongside Fatboy Slim, which is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So let me just rewind slightly. So I was doing the journalism, and one
Hmm.
day the editor said to me, "You like radio, Steve? Do you want to go to Capital Radio in London and cover the opening of the Capital Radio Cafe?" And the Capital Radio Cafe was this. It was like a themed restaurant below the Leicester Square, where Global is now, below Leicester Square. And they had a DJ booth in the restaurant, so that whoever was the DJ in the booth would broadcast the people eating their dinner. It's that kind of
That's so
like an
cool.
in-store radio thing. So of course I go and I track down the program director who was there at the opening of this restaurant. I said, "Oh, I've done some hospital radio," and he was like, "Oh, right, okay, bring in a tape. I'll give it." So the following day at 9 a.m., I was there at Capital with my tape, and I gave it to a guy called Pete Simmons, and he heard it. He got back to me. He said, "You need work, but we like your voice. Why don't you come in?" And they gave me like a chance to do like half an hour in the radio cafe, and they gave me a few shifts. And then I think it was a classic, like somebody went ill and I filled in for the main person. And bearing in mind, this is not on air. This is just me in in a restaurant. There are people eating burgers, and we play videos as well and stuff. So it was quite cool. I was only 18. But they then offered me a full-time job, which I took because the money was really good compared to journalism. I was doing all hours, and I passed my diploma in journalism, so I'd got that. So I thought, well, actually, I still had the radio bug, so I thought I'll give the radio thing a go, and I did it for a year. And then there was no real chance of being on air. So even though it was in the radio cafe, I did a couple of like overnight things at Capital, but there just wasn't a chance. And I was told to kind of go away and get some air miles. And I moved to Brighton, and I knew somebody who was setting up this tiny station called Surf 107. It's really cool. It was like played a bit of Fatboy Slim. We played Stereophonics. It was quite rocky indie dance station, and they gave me the afternoon show. Again, somebody pulled out. I think it was like the week before they had their lineup, and somebody pulled out, or they couldn't do it, or they were sick, and they asked me if I would like to take. So that was my first show in Brighton.
Yeah, that's a really great way to kind of get some air miles in, as you said. A lot of people do that. They kind of leave London. You might be trying to kind of get jobs in London, but I've recommended this in the past. It's good to kind of go to other places where the stations are a bit smaller, but it's a paid job, it's professional, and it's that kind of stepping stone to the bigger networks. Pete Simmons, by the way, used to be my boss, so we've had
Did
similar
he?
paths. Yeah, he did. Yeah, I used to work at Capital in the South, and he's still out there.
Yes.
He's been very good for discovering talent, isn't he?
Yeah, very fair guy, and I like him because he's always been just very upfront. He's very relaxed. He's very supportive. You don't feel nervous. He's one of the solid good guys.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, someone was leaving, someone was off, filling in sick. We all have this idea of, I'm going to send my demo. They're going to listen to me and think I'm the next biggest thing. They're going to give me the breakfast show. Like, in our heads, like, ideal scenario. But the reality is, a lot of this is about timing, right place, right time, and also persisting. So you're there kind of at the front of their minds when someone does leave or someone's off sick or on holiday. And I guess it's about snapping up those opportunities when someone's away for 2 weeks on holiday, getting that experience. So sometimes it's not the exciting contract offered on the spot that we'd hope for, but it's a really good way to and it's the more realistic way for most people to kind of get jobs.
Absolutely.
You start off as a cover presenter, and then you work your way up as you graft and kind of build on that. You then ended up working at Heart after that.
No, I was at Galaxy after that. So what happened, This is really cool. I've been on air in Brighton for about, I think it was about a year, just under a year. And I get a call from the guy who's my boss now at Virgin Radio, Mike Cass. And Mike was given the job. He worked at a station called Galaxy in Bristol. And he was given the job for one weekend to find new talent. And he had to, apparently he was driving around the South Coast, taping people's shows, because it was like 1990, 1998, I think it was, 1999. Anyway, so fortunately for me, it was a wet Friday afternoon. Mike always tells his story, and he was listening to people on Southern FM, various other radio stations, as you probably know, like Portsmouth Way, Southampton Way, and he got to Brighton, and he heard me do like a What's On link, just like, what was going on in the clubs, in the bars for Friday night, and he says that I was the only person who sounded like I wanted to be on the radio. And he just heard that 40 seconds. And he's like, let me meet him. So I met him the week after. And literally a month after that, I moved to Bristol to do the drive time show. And that was my first big show. That was Galaxy 101 in the southwest, the South Wales and the west. So you broadcast into, like Cardiff, Newport, over the bridge, Bristol, Western Super. They're huge TSA, million plus. And that's the first time I feel, wow, okay, this is really big. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a really big opportunity, because Galaxy, they had these huge audiences, didn't they? And then eventually they got changed to a Capital FM, those sort of local areas.
Yeah.
So how did that feel, kind of moving from Surf to Galaxy?
I mean, it was terrifying, but all of this is so good because in radio, you quite often have to move around the country. So, it's quite rare that you get a job where you live. I'm from London, but I've had to move to, like I said to you, to Brighton, Bristol, Manchester, Birmingham, back in London now on a national station. But every single move I've made has made me, I think, a better, stronger person, more confident person, because I knew nobody in Bristol. I literally just moved there and started fresh. And I still keep in touch with people now that I met in that 4-year period. You make of it what you want, really, and you learn. Every radio station I've worked at has been different regionally, different attitudes where you work and stuff. So it's kind of probably created the broadcaster I am today.
Hey folks, Emily here, and I'm interrupting this fascinating conversation, which I know can be irritating, but I wanted to ask you to do me a small favour that will help in a huge way. If you like this podcast, please subscribe now, wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google, or YouTube. Then leave a rating and a review. Every subscriber and every rating helps me to keep this podcast going. Thank you. And now back to our conversation.
Galaxy. How long were you at Galaxy for?
Galaxy for 6 years. I started off in Bristol for 4. Then I went to Manchester. So that's probably the biggest move of my career, because I was a Southern boy and I got the opportunity to go to Manchester. Again, I knew nobody. And I arrived in Manchester and I'd seen Queer as Folk. So I said to somebody, look, I want to look at flats around Canal Street, because that's kind of where I knew and where I wanted to work. So I ended up living on Canal Street in this place that was far too expensive. And I just thought, well, look, in order for me to afford it, I'm just going to have to put myself out there and try and get as much work. So I ended up it was the best 2.5 years of my life. I did the drive time show in Manchester. I played in 4 nightclubs a week. It was just brilliant. I got to know so many people. And I remember, Heart came to me after about 2 years there, and I was given the opportunity to work at Heart in Birmingham. And I said no originally, because I said, I love my life here and I've got so many friends and I can't imagine moving away. But they then offered a pay rise and I said, okay, bye. But no, I mean, the Manchester thing was really great and really life forming. And, I was probably the happiest I've been in ages when I arrived in Manchester. And just the fact that I built all of that on my own.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I guess also it's like you have to really immerse yourself. If you're being a radio presenter for that area, especially with local radio, you need to know what's going on. And the fact that you immersed yourself like that and you were playing in the clubs, you could actually bring up, stories of what you'd done that night in that club. And that's what the listeners want. Because if you weren't born and raised there, they're going to want someone who's involved in the local community and stuff. So I think that's wise that you did that. And also really fun. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. But I just felt a little bit out of my depth, I suppose, when I got to Manchester, because I had a Southern accent. And I
Yes.
remember them saying, you need to, when you say, because we were Manchester's #1 for dance and R&B, and I was saying dance, they were like, can you change that? We want you to say dance. So I had to watch what I was saying. So if it was grass, it was grass, and all that, bath, and all that. So I had to really, really immerse myself into the finer details of where you're living and the people you're broadcasting to and stuff. But I've got so much love for Manchester. So probably outside of London, that's the place I would move back to within a click of a finger. I would really, really recommend to do what I did. I mean, it was just that, out of luck, really, but do move around, because the more experience you've got in different markets and different places it makes you a better broadcaster, especially if
And
you're
now,
broadcasting all around the country.
yeah. And now obviously you're broadcasting nationally. So how different does that feel? Because you're not talking about the local, place you went to and the areas that you're living in. You're kind of trying to speak to a wider audience. How does that feel?
It feels amazing. I mean, it feels really special to be. I've been doing the show after Graham Norton for about a year and a half, which is a request show called On Demand, where people text in requests and we phone them back. But one moment you're speaking to somebody in Glasgow, the next is you go to Maidstone, Southampton, Edinburgh. It's just really great to know that you're broadcasting to all the areas. I think the thing is not to be too wherever you broadcast from, you're usually quite tempted to talk about that area, like the weather or what's happening or the underground strikes if you're here in London. So I think with me, it's probably not to be too London centric. And but the great thing about me is because I've worked virtually in every market around the country. I remember like the nightclubs that I used to go to there, and the sayings people have, and what people do at the weekends and stuff. I've still got friends everywhere, so it's just trying to be varied and equal when you're broadcasting, and not just talk about London where you're living and working.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And with these radio jobs, once you've got your foot in the door, so initially it's a lot of hard graft with networking, getting those first bookings. Once you've kind of got to that stage, so you've done Surf, you've done Galaxy, those are the next jobs. Did they come to you, or did you go out to find them?
It's all kind of worked back to back to back, really. So when I was at Galaxy, Heart got in touch because they were trying to make their stations younger. The only time it wasn't was when I finished Heart. And that was because they were trying to make the stations younger. And I'd been there for 14 years. So for whatever reason, they were just like, we're going to replace Steve with they replaced me with a 21-year-old girl, which was fine. But actually looking back on it, that was a really great experience for me, because I managed to get the Virgin Radio job and everything that's happened since, and it probably came along at the right time and has built my confidence. I think maybe 14 years was a bit too long to work at one place. And I think I didn't know it because I loved work. I loved the job. That's the thing. But I think I was probably getting a bit too relaxed, although I think I
Yeah,
was still doing great shows. So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever done a bad show, but,
of course.
but it was really good and a fun experience to start again. And so I had I went to India, Africa, LA in the summer of 2018 after Heart finished. And I just thought, I'm just going to take some time off of the radio thing just to test if I'm still in love with it. And then I came back and I got some shows on a couple of local BBC stations before I started at Virgin, and I did a couple of other things, and I realised that A, I still very much love it, and also B, I'm quite good at it. I think I kind of lost my confidence a bit after Heart, and I thought, does anyone want me? I don't know. Weird things were going on in my head, so it was really good for me to almost reset myself and come at it from a different angle. And the whole Virgin Radio thing, I had to really work hard to get that. Mike Cass, my boss, made me do about 4 or 5 pilots, and it's a very, very different way of broadcasting to what I was doing on Heart. So I really worked for it, and I got it. And it also, I'm probably a lot nicer. I'm probably a nicer person now, more appreciative, having had to step away and then coming back again after that whole experience.
Yeah, I think it's also, you get these jobs and you think, oh, that's it, I've made it. But there's quite a lot of pressure as a presenter with radio that hit those radar figures.
Yeah,
You want to see growth every quarter in your show. So, and if you see a dip in your show, you're questioning what happened. And then,
yeah,
the station like Heart, they've done so many sort of rebrands in the last few years. And Global
yeah.
itself, we got made redundant when on the show I was on down in the south because they had the whole deregulation thing with Ofcom where you didn't have to broadcast locally as many hours a day as they used to.
That was a big thing actually towards the end of working at Global. There are loads of great things to say about working at Global, but that particular time, dereg as you call it, it was like a cloud over us, and we were all like, "Oh my goodness, who's going to go? Is it going to be me? What's going to happen if that happens?" And it's a very stressful environment and time. When
Yeah.
you've got breakfast shows who've been in markets for years and years and years, but it's the way of the industry, and I get it.
It's just navigating those times and kind of not taking them personally and looking at it as an opportunity to kind of, as you just said, go and explore a whole new adventure. And if that hadn't have happened, you may still be at Heart now, and you're back in London and doing all these different things. So it kind of,
Yeah,
I feel like these things happen sometimes for a good reason, and
yeah.
it's good to have that kind of change in career growth that you may not have had otherwise. But on that note, in terms of challenges in this industry, what would you say is the most challenging part as a presenter that you might face along the way?
I suppose part of it now is the multimedia um, thing about being on radio. Because as you know, I mean, you're on screen and I'm on screen now, and that seems to be very much the way forward. So all the people, we work at Talk TV, and Talk Radio was a radio station for years, and bit by bit by bit, it's become more and more visual. So you've got quite a few presenters. They've done an amazing job, but quite a few of the people who started off on Talk Radio, Julie Harley Brewer, Mike Graham, Ian Collins, are radio people, and they've had to adapt, and it's quite an adaptation to be able to do on-screen stuff, because if you're in a radio studio, you're just like looking down at your notes or whatever. So I think that's become more of a thing. That's certainly something I've had to step up to the mark. I do little videos for Virgin Radio now as well, so it's completely changed. When I started, it was just a radio gig, or or you might broadcast in nightclubs occasionally, or do club gigs. But now I'm doing shows, they're being recorded, we're doing stuff on television. So I think you have to be more, you have to be more of an all-rounder, and B, you have to be up for being more more of an all-round talent, and learn, and also just take on new ways of broadcasting and new thinking, and say yes to everything. Say yes to everything and try your hardest, because the TV thing, as I was saying to you earlier, is a complete surprise as far as I'm concerned. At the age of 44, I did my first television appearance.
So now, it's true. A lot of radio is getting visualized. People are on camera. Do you find also that there's a pressure with social media? This is something I'm always kind of thinking about in my mind. Should I be focusing on growing my social media? Should I be doing more videos to camera just to build up my own following? Because there are some jobs out there where having a following is a big plus for the employer. Do you find that you'll kind of feel that pressure at times?
I haven't personally, but the only thing with social media is I've always been so aware of every single thing I post, because it can so easily come back and bite you. And my biggest advice with social media is that if you ever think, if you're a bit nervous about posting something, don't post it. If you ever think, I might get told off for doing this, don't do it, because once you do it, I've had so many friends, so many broadcasters who've lost their jobs, or there've been trouble, or got into newspapers because of things they've said, or we're quite responsible as broadcasters. So I think it's really good to just take it easy when it comes to social media. But I've never felt the pressure of having to grow my social media presence. It's kind of okay. It's not brilliant. I mean, if anyone wants to follow me, it's Steve_Denia. I mean, I'm not going to turn people away.
There we go. Little plug.
There we
Love
are.
it. Yeah, I know. It's a difficult one, because when you're a good radio presenter, like you are, like you're going to be hired all the time anyway. So it's not a necessity, but there are maybe it's more of a TV thing. I do think there are times where, and I see it more and more on Presently, we do see some jobs pop up and they're looking for people for TikTok jobs who already have a following on TikTok and things like that. So I think it's something to think about, but again, it's not for everyone. So you've worked in the industry for how many years now, would you say?
So since the newspaper thing, about 30 years, on air since 96. So that's quite scary, isn't it? It's like 26 years,
Wow.
26 years on air. Yeah.
That's a lot of experience. Amazing. And in all of those years, what would you say has been your career highlight to date?
Oh gosh, there's been so many. I mean, working at Heart was a massive thing. I did the Saturday night Club Classic show, which we broadcast from London, but it went to all the Hearts, you know. And as you went in the studio, it said you're entering a 9.8 million listener zone, and I was like, wow, that's quite cool.
Wow.
You know, on all those stations, that was pretty cool. And it was and like people still talk to me about the Club Classics at the weekend, you know, because I used to go out and listen to the show and stuff. So that was really great. I think actually most of it though has been since we've worked together. You know, working at news has been incredible. If somebody had said to me even back at 2018, Steve, in a couple of years you'll be warming up for Chris Evans, Graham Norton will be handing over to you. You know, you'll have Jeremy Kyle wanting you to guest on his TV show, I'll be like, what? so that is very special. What's happening right now is really, really special. So, and you know, I'm just saying yes to everything because it's so great working in that building, and everyone's so enthusiastic and kind, and they reward you if they think you're good and stuff. It's all good, I think, at the moment.
So that's the best answer. Like right now is the best place to be.
Well, it has to be, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it has to be.
Yeah.
And if it's not, if your answer to that question, you have to rethink what you're doing right now, don't you? I know, you know.
And what's one piece of advice you'd give to our listeners who are perhaps starting out, thinking about becoming a presenter, or they're in their early first couple of years, navigating their way? What would you say to them?
I would say that there's a few things. I would say that you have to be prepared to work for free and to do stuff. Like somebody said to me just last week, they said the key to doing well in media, and it was a great quote, and I have to get it right for you. It was being a really nice being a really nice person. People like you, and you've got to be good. And they said to me, you could be 2 out of the 3, but it would help if you're 3. You know, so I think actually being nice and people liking you is so important. It's not necessarily being great at the job. You've got to be great. You just got to kind of fit in. No one wants to work with a nightmare. So try and do as much as you can, and also don't be downhearted when it doesn't work out straight away. You know, things happen. They happen to all of us where, you know, things happen that are not so great, but it's how you deal with that. That's the important thing. It's not the setback that marks you. It's how you've come back from it. And don't let it get you down. Like, keep on. There's work out there. There's opportunities out there. You just have to kind of almost reinvent yourself when things, like when Heart got rid of me, they said, this is your opportunity to reinvent yourself. And that's what I did. I came back and get on with it, and you become a better, different broadcaster, but it's great experience.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's a really good attitude to have and some really useful advice. Thank you for that. And what is next for Steve Denyer, would you say? I mean, it sounds like everything's already pretty dandy right now, but where would you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Do you know, I don't know. Well, everything's great at the moment. I think the main thing would be if I could progress both the radio and the TV bits, I'd be really happy. If, you know,
good answer.
Yeah, I think just keep doing it bigger and better and stronger. But right now it's pretty good. So just kind of expanding on what I've got and what I've been talking to you about.
Yeah, amazing. Steve, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you today. And I guess we'll go back to our corridor waving next time I see you.
Yes, we must have that drink as well at that rooftop bar that we spoke about. We should do that.
We keep saying that.
We do.
Amazing. Thanks so much. It's been so good speaking to you.
I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for having me.